path to a better life begins with a simple step. Empower Radio presents Simple Steps, Real Change with Cheryl Maloney. Empower Radio. EmpowerRadio.com. Here's your host, Cheryl Maloney.
Have you ever stopped to consider how many times you say no to yourself? No to not eating your favorite foods. No to not going to the beach just to sit there and do nothing because that's what you need. Saying no to not being happy. Maybe you don't think that's what you're doing, but when you say no to yourself for no good reason, you're saying no to your own happiness. I know I've been a master at no in my life, but today's guest, Paul Boynton, author of Begin With Yes, opened my eyes to how I was denying myself out of habit those things that I wanted to say yes to more than anything. Hi, and welcome to the show. This is Cheryl, and I am so glad to welcome Paul to the show today. He is a dear friend, and he is the go-to guy when I need a lift up in my life. His philosophy is to leverage the law of action in every simple step you take. He's the author of Begin With Yes, that's become its own mantra all by itself. He's a blogger for Huffington Post, The Good Men's Project, and a regular columnist for New Hampshire's Business Review. With nearly 2 million followers on Facebook, Paul refreshingly simple and powerful, inspiring messages propel us to begin with yes. Paul, thank you for being on this show today. I'm so glad to have you here.
That is I'm so happy to be here, and that is really one of the nicest intros I've ever had. So I want to have you photocopy that and send it to me so I can use it again. It's so good to be back talking to Cheryl.
Well, and what's really cool about this, for those of you that are listening, Paul and I had worked together for years but had never met, and I was so grateful when I had an opportunity to go to Boston and meet Paul and another friend. And meeting you in person makes me realize that the persona that we see online are the exact same people. You are just this positive guy, and Begin With Yes is your mantra and always has been.
Well, I feel exactly the same way about having met you, and it really but it did give me faith in some of these Facebook connections that we make, that they can really lead to real friendships and meaningful friendships. And so meeting you for the first time face-to-face was like seeing an old friend again, and it really was a wonderful time. So I'll cherish it and look forward to the next time.
Well, we are in the same place. And, you know, as you and I both talk, and I laugh because this is so true and people don't understand it well enough, you truly are a chief optimist. Have you always been that way?
I think, truthfully, I always have. So it comes more naturally to me than it does to some people. And so I get that sometimes being so optimistic can actually be annoying. Now, that does not mean that I do not have challenging days. And in fact, in my book, Begin With Yes, I write about being stuck in a job that was totally demoralizing for like almost 5 years. So it's not like I don't know what it's like not to be happy in a situation. But at the same time, my tendency is to, no matter what's going on for me, my tendency is to be asking myself, what now? And what now? I love that question because it sort of motivates me and gets me thinking about, well, what can I do as opposed to what can't I do? And when I'm moving, when I'm taking action, when I'm doing something, even if it's something very, very small, I feel better. And I think that most of us do feel better when we're actually doing something about whatever is bothering us or bugging us or exciting us.
That's such a key foundation in your book, and I think that it's often missed in the world today. We hear all this stuff about the law of attraction, but you focus on the law of action. So explain that a little bit to our audience that may not understand what that is.
Yeah, I think, I do think that having positive thoughts and thinking positively is important and meaningful and does help, but I actually think that if you stop there, then you're not showing up as fully as you can, and probably not as fully as you need to in order to make something happen. So I think the universe sort of meets us when we step out into sort of the mystery a little bit, and then we find that the universe meets us. It's not, it doesn't come chasing us. We have to step out into a space where we can be found, and I think we're doing that when we take a small step. We're moving. It's interesting to me that I talk to so many people, Cheryl, who feel like they're stuck,
Yep.
and it's true. And I have been there myself, where I have felt like I'm stuck. But if you ask yourself, well, instead of focusing on what you can't do, if you can focus, well, what's one small thing I can do? And you take that step, and it may be like simply going for a walk, or turning the lights off, or taking a nap, or it can be little things, or seemingly little things. If you do something, then by definition you're no longer stuck because you're moving. And there's something that's liberating about moving. And sometimes the small step is actually just move.
Isn't that interesting? Because we tend to think that the only way we're going to change our lives are with these grand gestures and major, massive changes. And just the fear of all of that keeps us frozen from doing anything. So, like you said, something simple. I know, you're aware of what I've been through in the last couple of years, and I found myself just going, okay, I can't even leave my house. Right. Because of that being frozen. But when you take the first step out the door, or in my case, coming back on the radio again, yep, you realize how much better you feel with that little step. And really you're farther ahead than where you were.
Right. And let's remember that our path to wherever we're going is not a straight line. It's not just put one foot in front of the other and 2 days later you'll be where you want to be, or you will have moved past your overwhelming grief. Because I don't think life unfolds that way. In fact, I think we have to expect a lot of mystery along the way. A lot of times, and tell me if this has been true for you, a lot of times I've set off with a specific target or goal in mind, and a while after I'm moving and finding myself moving in that direction, all of a sudden there's some sort of shift that shakes things up a little bit, and all of a sudden I discover that I've been sort of rerouted. And so I think we have to be willing to, and I'm not the first person to say this, but to embrace the mystery, to understand that nothing is a straight line, and it's just one foot in front of the other. One small
and let it go where it takes us.
Right, exactly. And it's great to have a focus. It's great to know that you're heading in a specific direction. But if you find yourself shifting, why resist? Because the shift is most likely coming from sort of this inner guidance or inner voice, and you wouldn't have reached that place where you needed to shift unless you had taken the steps that got you to that point. So it all, at the end of the day, it all sort of adds up, and it all sort of does make sense. But I don't think that we can expect to understand it all while we're in the middle of it.
It's such a good point, because so many folks that I've seen said, this is the way my life is going to unfold. And then it takes them sideways. I've been through that. I mean, my life has changed more times in the last 10 years. And I thought it was on a straight, narrow path, but every change, even though some of them have been horrendously difficult, have taken me somewhere else that I wouldn't have had the opportunity to be, except for what I went through. And you could see it as being bad, but that makes you feel really bad.
Right.
You can see it as being, what am I supposed to be learning? The universe, as you say, is teaching me something here. Right. I may not have wanted to learn it, but you know what? I do now, and I'm stronger. And we have to be open to that. And it's hard. You're right. When we're in the middle of just the worst life has to offer, we can't see it.
And
so,
to me, Cheryl, and especially knowing what you've been through, it doesn't mean that we have to like it or even really embrace the challenges or difficulties that we have to go through. It's more about, well, that's been my reality, so let me look around and see what I can find happening around me that is positive that I can shift my attention to, because there almost always is something.
There is. And as you're looking at, begin with, yes, for those folks that find themselves in a place that they never would have wished on their worst enemy, let alone had to be living through, right. You have. So are you going to stay in that place, or are you going to take that action that will move you to a more positive place? Because it's all a choice for us.
Absolutely. And it does feel, I think you would agree that most of these small steps are not quick fixes, or do not make everything beautiful overnight, or all of a sudden wonderful or happy again. But there is something in the simple act of taking a step that at least makes me feel more powerful and more in charge of my life. And just that all by itself does feel better than just staying in some dark place. It's like, do you sit alone in the dark, or do you get up and turn the lights on?
And isn't that simple? Well, I've got a quote from you, and actually it's from today. It's that there are many demands on your time, resources, and energy, but still you deserve to be happy and fulfilled, and need to save some of that attention for your own dreams. Trust your ability to discover a small step you can take for yourself and put it at the top of today's list. That way, there'll be time for everyone and everything else, and for once, time for you. And that's really what you're talking about with this, is you're doing this for you, and it's a small step, and your happiness is just as important as the happiness of everyone else.
Absolutely. And in fact, I would argue that if you're happy, everyone else around you is going to be happy too. So the whole world benefits by you taking a moment to pay attention to yourself. And I did that post show because I think we have so many legitimate, good, reasonable, understandable excuses for not doing things.
Yeah.
So we've got, pets to take care of, parents to take care of, we've got work that needs to be done, the house that needs to be cleaned. We can I think most of us can make a list a mile long of all the things that we've got to get done. And it's so easy to put yourself at the bottom of the list. And when I do that, by the time I get into bed, I'm probably too tired to do the last thing on my list. So moving it to the top of the list and recognizing that it's just a small step. I'm not asking you to take the day off and go sit in a library and write a paper. I'm saying do some small thing for yourself, because those small things do add up. And if you do, even if it takes 5 minutes, in fact, I love the 5-minute steps, because at the end of a week, the 5 minutes have turned into 35 minutes of taking care of yourself. And no one has suffered. No project has gone undone. The dog's been fed. Things do get done. So using everything that we have to do, and I'm not being disrespectful of how crazy complicated life can be for many people, including me sometimes, but if we use that for an excuse, then we're going to never, ever, ever get to a place where we're paying attention to our own dreams.
Exactly. As we look at, there are times in our lives when we know we have to put others' priorities first. Yep. It's a requirement. Your children are growing and they have special needs. Your husband's in hospice. You know what your priorities are. Yep. But there's 5 minutes when you're alone. There's 5 minutes when you can sit and breathe. Maybe it's just sitting there and thinking nothing, and letting it go, to give yourself this chance to just be, and not struggling with everything else. But you're right, 5 minutes is 35 minutes a week. Okay, well, maybe tomorrow it's 6 minutes or 7 minutes.
Once you start doing it, you find out that you're wasting a lot of time.
You haven't hurt anyone, and you've helped yourself. And you are spot on to say that when you're happy and you help yourself, you can better help others who you think are your priorities, or are your priorities. what's the phrase? Happy wife, happy life, happy husband, happy
true.
that kind of thing. And it's very true. So give yourself the chance to be happy. And none of us that live this life set aside the fact that there are challenges in life, but they're moments, they're periods of time. They're not an entire life.
Right. And sometimes, you know what? I've told people, lock yourself in the bathroom for 5 minutes. I mean, it's like, I can't imagine that there is anybody listening to this, no matter how busy they are, that couldn't find 5 minutes.
Right.
In their day. So it's more about being a little disciplined about, and it's also about making a decision about what you're going to do. It's, taking a small step begs the thought process of thinking, well, what small step would make sense for me today? What is one small thing I could do to move myself in a direction that I want to move?
Paul, over the course of the years, I know that you've coached and counseled people along the way. Have you ever encountered that pessimist? I know that I have, that believes that being anything other than pessimistic, that's realistic. And how do you live in this world of optimism when that's not real life? What do you say to those folks?
I do think that, first of all, there are some people, I guess I don't see it as my responsibility and my role to talk people out of feeling however they want to feel. So that's the first thing I would say to that question. But I would also say, if it were a coaching situation, look, it doesn't feel to me like we're going to be very successful working together, and so maybe save your money, because we're not gonna make any real progress unless you're willing to be open to some shifts. And I'm not being judgmental or critical. I'm sort of getting more and more comfortable with just letting other people be. If
Exactly.
you want to have that worldview, and boy, this whole political year has challenged my thinking around this. But it's sort of just, I'm going to just sort of let you be you, and it's not my job or my responsibility, or I wasn't put on this earth to talk you out of being you. You have your own journey, and we all sort of have to find our own way. We can seek out people to help us, but if we seek out people to help us and then we're not willing to let them help us, then what good is it?
And that's our choice. You and I have a very similar philosophy, because Simple Steps has always been based on the belief that everyone's entitled to their own beliefs. I don't get to judge them, and neither does anyone else, because we're not walking in their shoes.
Right.
And have no idea where that perspective comes. So it is a challenging time on both ends of the spectrum in our world today, from, like you say, the political standpoint, the fears that are out there. The truth is, we are going to allow ourselves to feel what we want to feel. And in that, there's some knowledge.
Right.
Because
that's very true.
And that now, it's hard to believe that the stresses of our lives teach us something, because we spend so much time railing against them. We don't stop to say, what am I supposed to learn? And I'll share the story, and I think I've said this to you at one point. There were times right after Jack died that I would just sit in a corner and be overwhelmed with grief and tears, and it just knocked me to my knees. And after the first one or two times, I stopped and said, okay, I'm supposed to feel this. What is it I'm supposed to feel about all of this? So instead of struggling against it, I allowed it to be what it needed to be. And I think we can do that, whether it's a large situation like a grieving situation, or it's, okay, I didn't get that job, or you know what, I expected so-and-so to do this for me. That didn't happen.
Right.
What am I supposed to learn from this experience?
Right, and I think as you share your story with people, you're really helping people sort of see a pathway out of difficult times for themselves. And I don't think that they're, especially dealing with the death of your partner and the person that you had lived your life with. It's like you don't get over that. Maybe you never get over that in totality. So the question is really, what's one small thing I can do today to feel a little tiny bit better? Not how can I get beyond this, how can I get over this. It's more about shifting your attention to something that's grounded in reality. It's not naive to think, well, maybe I could feel a little tiny bit better. And sometimes that sort of calls us to stop paying attention to how we're feeling and paying attention to ourselves and maybe getting engaged or involved in helping somebody else get to a better place.
And that's, when you help someone else, no matter what you're going through, if you help someone else, you always feel better. You help them, they feel better. But in the meantime, it's helping you too.
Right.
And while it may be noble or altruistic to help another, you do help yourself. There's nothing wrong with that.
No, nothing wrong. In fact, isn't that a wonderful sort of miracle? It's like when you change someone's life, you're changing your own life. And how it's kind of remarkable. The other thing that I wanted to say, because you were talking about being around people that are pessimistic, we also get to choose who we want to spend a lot of time with. And so if you have people in your life that are not lifting you up and who are sort of holding you back, then I really sort of suggest that people might want to spend less time with those people. And sometimes they say, well, I can't help it. It's my husband or it's my mother or it's my... And I mean, and in some cases it's not like an easy exit or even that an exit is the right thing to do. But what you can do is bring more positive people into your life to sort of offset the negativity if that's the situation you find yourself in. So again, it's like sort of owning... So the focus isn't on, how... pessimistic Mary is, she just makes me upset when I'm around her. It's really you sort of stepping up and taking responsibility. Well, what can I do to feel a little bit better and probably spend a little less time with Mary?
Simple thing to do. Right. And you're right. If it's a spouse, if it's your mother, you're in different places. But I've even found with the folks where I find the husband and the wife are in very different places, sometimes that optimism and that positivity starts to wear onto the other partner. Yep. And yes, there's a chance for that negativity to go the other way. You sit there and say to yourself, okay, where do I want this to go? I'm going to do the best that I can for myself, and hopefully that will work. If it doesn't, then I make a decision how I go forward. And maybe it's, I'm going to spend more time with my hobbies, or I'm going to spend more time out with friends. So your point's so well taken. It's like, it doesn't have to be a major life change. We're not advocating go, divorce your husband or leave your mother sitting where she is. It's let's shift this just a little bit.
Right. Shift from focusing on what I can't do to what I can do. It's like, boy, I can't tell you how many times I've been all worked up about something, and that's really outside of my control. Lots of things are outside of our control. So focusing on that and sort of staying enmeshed in something that's outside of your control does not serve anybody really well. So simply saying, well, what can I do? That kind of shift at least brings you to a different place.
And Paul, as we're winding down here on the show, I don't know where this time's gone.
Down.
We are winding down on the show, okay. So I want you to share with the audience what they can do to connect with Begin With Yes, and you've got a new book out. Tell people about the new book about your health.
I've got a couple of new books. First of all, please go to my Begin With Yes Facebook page. We're almost 2 million, and it's a wonderful community. It's like people post something, and then they get 40 replies to something that they posted, so that it's a really engaged community that full of lovely people. So go there. If you're interested in looking at the books that I've written, you can go to my website, which is just www.beginwithyes.com, and everything is there. My latest books are a workbook and then a journal where you can keep track of the small steps that you're taking and keep track of the progress that you're making. And now I'm working on a new book called Be Amazing. So the next time we talk, we can talk about that if you want to, Cheryl.
Awesome. I will absolutely love it. Well, Paul, thank you so much for being here with me today and for sharing your chief optimism with the world. It's a simple step, and you are a blessing to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was great talking to you, Cheryl.
All right. You take care. We'll talk again soon.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Paul. Everyone, thanks for being here with me. This is Cheryl Maloney, and you've been listening to the Chief Optimist, Paul Boynton from Begin With Yes. It's time to take that step in the direction that's going to bring you to a more positive place in your life. Until next time, have a wonderful week, and may all your simple steps be what you need them to be for you.